Hi everybody, here we are. It is review video number 2, and this one deals with chapter 2 in your textbook, Getting the Message Across. We started off this chapter by defining communication, everybody. What is communication? And remember, it comes from that Latin word, and it means common. Okay, having something in common through shared knowledge, right? You're sharing that knowledge with and exchanging information with somebody is what communication can be defined as. We went on to talk a little bit about communication as that field of study on page 45 in your textbook. We gave you that definition of communication theory, which was that system for expressing, a system of ideas for explaining communication, everybody. That's that communication theory. And at the bottom of page 45, it goes in to talk about rhetoric, semantics, semiotics, and cybernetics. So definitions that you need to be aware of as we're talking about communication as that field of study. We went ahead and looked at a communication process, everybody, which is on pages 46 and 47. We defined that communication process. What is it? It has to be situated, it has to be relational, and it has to be transactional. Okay, all parts of that communication process. I shared with you that transaction communication model on page 47. We use this a lot when we're trying to figure out if communication has been delivered successfully. Okay, so what do we need to have to make that model work, everybody? This is, we've got the sender. The sender is then encoding their idea. They're going to pick a channel that they're going to transmit their message through. So channel could be something like an email, could be a text message, could be a memo. Okay, how are we getting that message across? What channel are we using? And then there has to be a receiver at that other end. And that receiver has to be able to decode the message that you're sending to them. And they have to be able to understand that message. Okay, and then we've got feedback coming back from the receiver to the sender. And this then lets the sender know that that message has been received and has been interpreted correctly. So things that you need to remember, everybody, in that transactional communication model. Okay, we did talk a little bit about barriers to effective communication. Okay, what are some of those barriers? How do we overcome those barriers? Page 49, everybody talks to you about communication contexts. Okay, we take a look at interpersonal communication and what is interpersonal communication. Okay, it is communication between two people. Interpersonal. Intrapersonal is one person, and that's a lot of what goes on in your mind. But here we're talking about interpersonal, and it's that communication between two people, that sender and that receiver. It can also be called dyadic. Okay, so a dyad is two, if that helps you remember. Okay, and it goes through that a little bit on pages 49 through to page 50. We did also talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. Maybe not necessarily on this quiz, but I want you to be aware of what emotional intelligence is in order to make you that better communicator. Okay, being aware not only of your emotions, but also of somebody else's. Then we get to my most favorite part, pardon me, of communications, and that's on page 53, everybody, and that's the nonverbal communication. That's what I really miss about being in a classroom, is that ability to read nonverbal communication and understand if people are following what it is you're trying to convey to them. So nonverbal communication, everybody, again, what is it? Definition is on page 53. That's the communication that does not use words, and that occupies at least 93% of communication today, everybody, is delivered nonverbally. Okay, so make sure that you understand what nonverbal is, what components make up that nonverbal model. So this is your eye gaze, your facial expressions, that ability to read somebody's facial expressions, your body movements, okay, shrugging of shoulders, sitting back in a chair, not really into what's being conveyed to you. Personal space and use of time are other indicators, pardon me, of nonverbal. Your tone, your inflection, how you're conveying that message, and other acoustic properties of speech are all forms of nonverbal, everybody. Make sure that you understand what nonverbal is. We go on to talk a little bit about the components of nonverbal communication. I'm on page 55. Proxemics, that use of space, everybody, make sure you understand that. They also go on to talk to you about paralanguage, chromatics, okay, that use of time. Another one, everybody, is under that paralanguage is your body language, your kinesics. Okay, it's a field of research that examines communication through body movements, right? Big part of nonverbal. Your gestures, your posture, your eye contact, facial expressions, your image, all portray nonverbal. Communication competence on page 59, everybody. We took a tiny bit of a look at that. Okay, cross-cultural communication on page 63. We talk again, we mentioned this in chapter 1, but it's again in chapter 2, everybody, where we're talking about diversity in the workplace and what does that look like, okay? StatsCan, bottom of page 63, predicts that by 2031, so 11 years from now, everybody, between 11.4 million and 14.4 million people living in Canada, so that's approximately 1/3 of our population, could belong to a visible minority group. Okay, so that is huge when we're talking about diversity in the workplace, being culturally aware of all of those different cultures that are coming at you, okay? Understanding cultural differences. We also talked a little bit about, which led us into page 65, everybody, that high and low context cultures, okay? High context cultures, cultures in which communication depends sorry, let me try that again. Cultures in which communication depends not only on that explicit wording of a message, but also on the message's context, okay? So a lot of those that are in that high context category are your Asian cultures, East Indian, Asian cultures represent that. So it's not just the explicit wording of it, but it's also the other things that are going on. Low context cultures, those are your Canadian, your American, a lot of your European cultures. We favor that direct communication approach, and we depend on explicit verbal and written messages exclusive of context. We're very much that direct wording, okay? High context and low context cultures, everybody, please make sure that you understand what the differences are between those two different types of cultures. Okay, moving through chapter 2 and getting that message across, everybody, that pretty much takes us to the end of what we discussed. So make sure you understand cultural diversity. What is it? High context, low context cultures. Very much that transactional communication model, nonverbal, all of those are key parts of this chapter 2, everybody. That's also part of that quiz. And again, the quiz comprises 30 questions. They will be multiple choice questions. Okay, so 30 questions, 30 minutes, covering chapters 1, 2, and 13. I'm now going to come back to you with a additional video covering chapter 13, and I will be back in just a few minutes. Thank you.